I've always thought that fall in Bakersfield has a special flavor of disappointment. It's not because it's bad here. It's just that our California town has held on to summer for too long, reluctant to give up its hot days for cooler ones. This evening, sitting on the porch with a cup of tea, I watched the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky shades of orange and pink. 56 years of life have taught me to appreciate such moments of silence. My name is Tora Caldwell, and for the last 30 years I taught math at a local school until I retired 3 years ago. Now I tutor part-time, not so much for the money as to keep from going crazy from being alone in this house that used to be filled with voices. Thora! A familiar voice interrupted my thoughts. Are you dreaming again? Effie Thornton, my neighbor for 22 years, stood at the gate with a basket of fresh tomatoes. Her graying hair was pulled back in a loose bun, and her eyes radiated the cheerfulness I often lacked. I've just made some tea, I invited, smiling. Effie was the only person I could talk to for hours. Since the death of my husband Vincent 8 years ago, she has been my rock, never imposing, but always there for me. I brought you the last of my garden's produce. Effie placed the basket on the table. How was the lesson with your new student? Caden has potential, but he lacks focus, I replied, pouring a second cup of tea. His parents think a tutor should work miracles in a month. People always want quick results. Effie settled into the wicker chair. I tensed involuntarily. My son, my pride, and my pain was a topic that always caused conflicting feelings. No, he called yesterday. He said he was coming over on Friday with Maeve for dinner. Effie knew about my complicated relationship with my son, and especially my daughter-in-law. I sighed as I sipped my tea. Gareth, he's changed, Effie. Sometimes I don't recognize him as the boy I raised. My son worked as a building inspector, and this job seemed to only reinforce his natural tendency to find fault with everything, especially me. With each visit, the tension between us grew, as if an invisible wall was getting higher and higher. How's Maeve? Effie asked cautiously. As always, she thinks I was a terrible mother. I smiled bitterly. You know, last time she accidentally spilled wine on Gareth's baby photo album, and she didn't even apologize. She's jealous, Effie said simply, afraid of your influence on Gareth. I shook my head. If only. Gareth looks at me as if I'm responsible for all his failures in life. Do you remember when he blamed me for not letting him drop out of college and go to Los Angeles with that rock band? He was just a kid then, Thora. He was 18. And now he's 32, and he still brings it up every time we argue. I could feel the old pain rising to the surface. Last month he said that if it weren't for my interference, he could have become a famous musician instead of being stuck in this damn city. Effie touched my arm. You're both too stubborn, just like Vincent. The mention of my husband brought back a warm wave of memories. Vincent had always been a buffer between me and my son, able to smooth out the sharp edges of our personalities. After he died of a heart attack, something finally broke between Gareth and I. Vincent and I wanted the best for him, I said quietly. We worked extra shifts to pay for his education. I spent sleepless nights checking his notebooks to make sure he had money for his musical instruments and those damn guitar lessons. He knows that, Thora. Deep down, he does. Sometimes I doubt it, I admitted, especially since Maeve came along. It's like she's feeding his resentment. You know what she said at Thanksgiving? That I'm too controlling and that's why Gareth has trust issues. Effie grimaced. That woman has a talent for drama. Do you remember when she said her parents were poor, and then it turned out her father owned a car dealership? We both laughed, and I felt the tension slowly ease. I'm dreading their visit on Friday, I admitted. The last few times they've come over, they've ended up fighting. Last time Gareth accused me of not helping them with the down payment on the house. But you offered. Of course I did. But Maeve thought it was meddling. And now that they've bought that house in the North End and are struggling to make ends meet, it seems I should have insisted. Effie shook her head. It's a classic case of guilty by association, guilty by omission. Exactly, I sighed. The worst part is that Gareth always takes her side, even when he knows she's wrong. The sun had almost disappeared and the yard was shrouded in twilight. Effie stood up, picking up her empty cup. Dean is waiting for dinner. She hugged me. Don't take it so personally, Thora. Maybe this time the visit will go better. I nodded, not believing my own words. Maybe. After Effie left, I sat on the veranda for a while watching the stars light up. At such moments, the loneliness felt especially acute. Sometimes I imagined how my life would have been if Vincent had been alive. Would he have been able to restore my connection with my son? Would he have been able to resist Maeve's influence? The cool evening breeze made me walk back to the house. The old wooden house where Vincent and I had lived our entire married life now seemed too big for one person. But selling it meant giving up the last material connection to the past, to those happy days when we were a family. In the kitchen, I automatically washed the cups and decided to check the mail that I had left unread that morning. Among the advertising brochures and bills, I noticed an envelope with the emblem of the Blue Shield Insurance Company. It was strange, I didn't remember applying for any new insurance policies. Opening the envelope, I pulled out a document with the heading, Notice of Change of Beneficiary of Insurance Policy. I was surprised to see my name as the insured, and in the beneficiary column was the name of my son, Gareth Caldwell. My heart skipped a beat. I read the document again, trying to understand what was happening. According to this paper, I had a life insurance policy for $500,000, and the only beneficiary was Gareth. I checked the date of issue, 2 weeks ago. Surprise turned to alarm. I definitely hadn't taken out any insurance, but the signature on the document looked surprisingly similar to mine. A cold wave ran through my body. I sat down at the kitchen table, holding the paper with trembling hands. Gareth had taken out life insurance on my life without my knowledge? How was that even possible? Fragments of conversations flashed through my mind, Maeve's strange looks, Gareth's sudden caring lately. He had started calling more often, asking about my health, even offering to organize a medical checkup for prevention. Now everything was taking on a sinister meaning. I remembered how a few weeks ago Gareth had asked me to sign some papers to update the data at the bank, where he said he was opening a new account and had to provide contact information. I signed it without even looking. I trusted my son. The coldness that gripped me had nothing to do with the chill of the evening. My own son, my flesh and blood. Could he be capable of such a thing? I wrapped my arms around my head, trying to control my panic. I had to think rationally. Could there be some logical explanation? Could it be that Gareth just wanted to provide me with additional insurance and didn't want to bother me with the details? But then why is he the beneficiary? Why did he forge my signature? And why had he been so strangely attentive lately? My pulse was pounding in my temples as I walked over to the phone with the intention of calling Gareth and demanding an explanation. But something stopped me. The instinct of self-preservation, which I had thought had long since fallen asleep, suddenly woke up and told me, don't show what you know. Don't betray yourself. I slowly hung up the phone. If my suspicions were correct, if Gareth was really up to something terrible, warning him would only make him more cautious. I needed time. Time to think and develop a plan. I looked at the document in my hands again. $500,000. Enough money to tempt a man who is up to his eyeballs in debt and has always believed that life owes him something. As I sat at the kitchen table with the document in my hands, I felt something inside me change forever. The crack between me and my son, which had been gradually widening over the years, had now turned into an abyss. And at the bottom of this abyss was something dark and dangerous, something I never wanted to see in my own child. I carefully folded the document and tucked it into the inside pocket of an old photo album, the same one that Maeve had accidentally spilled wine on. Somehow it seemed symbolic. The wind outside the window picked up, swaying the branches of the old maple tree in the yard. I heard a warning in its noise. I spent the next 2 days before the Friday dinner in a strange state of numbness. During the day, I mechanically conducted classes with my students, smiling, explaining algebraic formulas, and at night I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Unanswered questions circled in my head like hungry crows. Why does my son hate me so much? When did our relationship take such a terrible turn? The insurance document hidden in the photo album seemed like a ticking time bomb. I took it out every night, rereading it, trying to find another explanation other than the most obvious and horrible one. On Thursday, I called the insurance company, introducing myself as a secretary checking policy details. The young voice on the other end of the line confirmed that the policy was active, the premiums were paid 6 months in advance, and that the client recently inquired about the payout terms. The client is my son. On a Friday morning, I was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, looking at a picture of Gareth in an old wooden frame. The 10-year-old boy with bright red hair and freckles sprinkled across his nose was smiling broadly as he held up a fish he had just caught. It was our first fishing trip together after he had been begging Vincent to take him for months. How proud my son was that day. How happy he was. When did that change? Where did I go wrong? Perhaps the problems began in his teenage years. Gareth was always a sensitive boy who could easily be hurt by a careless word. At 15, he became interested in music, locking himself in his room for hours with a guitar that Vincent and I had given him for his birthday. Music became his passion, and then the bone of contention between us. I remembered our big fight when Gareth announced that he was dropping out of college to go to Los Angeles with some semi-professional rock band. I told him that I would not pay for his education if he threw away such a life for a dubious adventure. "You have never supported me," he shouted, slamming the door. "You want me to live your dreams, not mine. Was I being too strict? Was I really trying to control his life, as Maeve claimed? I always thought I was fighting for his future, for stability, for an education that Vincent and I could not afford. But maybe I didn't see how my own fears and failures were affecting my son. I wanted him to have a safe, stable life, something that was so often missing in my childhood with an alcoholic father and a mother who worked 3 jobs. After that fight, Gareth did graduate from college, but he never forgave me for the destroyed dream. He got a job as a building inspector, a reliable but unloved job. He married Maeve, who looked at me warily from the first time we met, as if I were a rival, not the mother of her husband. I put the photo back and looked at my watch. It was 5 in the evening. In 2 hours, Gareth and Maeve would be coming over for dinner, and I would have to look my own son in the eye, knowing that he might be planning to kill me. The thought made me sick. I walked out into the backyard, breathing in the fresh air, trying to calm down. Am I really that bad of a mother? Did I really deserve such hatred from my own child? The ringing of the phone made me jump. It was Gareth. "Mom, Maeve and I are going to be a little late." He sounded strangely tense. "We'll be back around 8, okay?" "Sure," I replied, trying to sound normal. "Is something wrong?" No, just work stuff. I'll see you then." He hung up quickly. I stood there holding the phone, feeling suspicion poisoning my every thought. Before, I would not have even paid attention to this call. Now I was analyzing every word, every intonation. At 8 o'clock in the evening, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the most difficult role in my life, the role of a mother who doesn't know that her son wants her dead. Gareth walked in first, tall and thin, looking so much like Vincent when he was younger. He was followed by Maeve, a graceful blonde with sharp features and a wary gaze. "Hi, Mom." Gareth gave me an awkward hug. "Sorry I'm late." "It's okay," I smiled, feeling my lips tremble. "Come in, dinner's ready." Maeve handed me a bottle of wine. "It's that red you like," she said with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Thank you, that was very thoughtful of you," I said, taking the bottle. Gareth looked tense. His gaze darted around the room, never stopping on my face for long. Maeve, on the other hand, was overly friendly, complimenting me on my appearance and the aroma wafting from the kitchen. We sat down at the table and I began to lay out the food. "How's your work going, son?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation going. "Fine," he shrugged. "Lots of inspections lately, new building codes." "And you, Maeve? How are things in accounting?" "Oh, everything's great." She cut a piece of meat with a little too much energy. "You know, I got promoted last month. I'm a senior accountant now. Congratulations. That's great news." Gareth glanced over at his wife. "Didn't we tell you? It's been a while. A while." "No, we didn't. But I'm happy for you, Maeve." "With the promotion came a raise," she continued, twisting a strand of hair around her finger, a gesture she made when she was nervous. We're thinking about renovating the bathroom. That's great. I tried to sound interested, even though all my senses were heightened to the limit. By the way, Gareth, I saw a new crossover outside your house when I drove by last week. Did you change your car? Yeah, it's a company car, for Maeve, he replied, stumbling. The company gives accountants company cars? I couldn't help but wonder. It's a special occasion, Maeve interjected, her cheeks slightly flushed. I often travel to see clients. I nodded, not letting on that I sensed a lie. A new car, a bathroom remodel. Where did the couple who had been complaining about their mortgage payments a month ago suddenly have all this money? And how's your health, Mom? Gareth suddenly asked, changing the subject. I'm fine, I replied, watching his reaction carefully. The doctor says I'm in great shape for my 56 years. That's good, he nodded, avoiding my gaze again. But you should have regular checkups. At your age, well, you know. Oh, yes, Maeve chimed in, suddenly animated. My aunt was perfectly healthy, and then suddenly she had a stroke. No one was expecting it. I felt a chill go down my spine. I hope she's okay. Oh no, she died, Maeve said as casually as if she were talking about the weather. The doctor said she didn't even realize what was happening. Gareth coughed, casting a warning look at his wife. Maeve means that prevention is very important. Of course, I smiled, feeling my mouth dry. I'm always looking after my health. We spent the rest of dinner in intense conversation about the weather, politics, and local news. I watched as Gareth drank his third glass of wine, an unacceptable luxury for someone who usually limited himself to one because he had to drive. After dessert, an apple pie I had baked in the morning, Maeve suddenly suggested, Thora, could you show me those old photos from the wedding? I've been wanting to see them for a long time. I froze. Sure, I replied slowly. But why the sudden interest? Oh, just, she shrugged. I thought it would be interesting to see how you and Vincent looked young. And Gareth told me there were pictures of him as a child. Yes, there are. I stood up from the table. Wait here, I'll get them. In the bedroom, I quickly took out the photo album, pulled out the insurance document, and hid it under the mattress. When I returned to the living room, I noticed that Gareth and Maeve were talking quietly but intensely about something. They immediately stopped talking when they saw me. Here, I put the album on the table. This is our whole life. We spent the next hour flipping through the pages, and I told them the stories behind each photo. Gareth smiled several times, recalling episodes from his childhood. For a moment, I thought I saw a shadow of our former intimacy, but it quickly disappeared when Maeve accidentally spilled wine on the tablecloth. Oh my God, I'm sorry, she exclaimed, grabbing napkins. I'm so clumsy. It's okay, I reassured her, although I noticed that the wine had spilled quite a ways from her hand, almost on purpose. Around 11 in the evening, they started to get ready. Gareth looked tired and a little drunk. I'll drive, Maeve said, taking the keys from his hands. When they were on the doorstep, Gareth suddenly turned around. By the way, Mom, I'll stop by tomorrow. I want to pick up some tools I left in the garage. I'll be home around 2, okay? Sure, I nodded, feeling my whole body tense. After they left, I sat in the silence of the living room for a long time. Their behavior, the talk of health and sudden death, the new car they couldn't afford, Gareth's planned visit. Everything was pointing in one direction, and it was horrible. The next morning, I woke up at first light. I didn't get much sleep. My dreams were disturbing, filled with images of Gareth holding out a glass of some kind of liquid to me, and Maeve standing behind me with a predatory smile. At 9 in the morning, I called Lawrence Gibbs, the lawyer who had handled all of our family affairs when Vincent was alive. Lawrence, it's Tora Caldwell. I need your advice. Of course, Thora, he replied in his deep, calm voice. What's up? Not on the phone. I tried to sound calm. Can I come over? An hour later, I was sitting in his cozy downtown office, looking at the diplomas on the wall and the photos of his 3 children on the desk. Lawrence, a tall man with graying temples, listened intently as I told him about the document I had found, about Gareth and Maeve's strange behavior, about their financial problems, and the sudden appearance of money. I know it sounds paranoid, I finished my story, but all the facts add up to a terrifying picture. Lawrence took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Thora, these are serious accusations. Do you realize that? Of course I do. Do you think I want to believe that my son is planning to kill me? I felt tears coming to my eyes. He sighed. Let's look at it from a legal point of view. It's fraud to take out an insurance policy without your knowledge and forge your signature. But proving that they plan to use the policy, it's almost impossible without concrete evidence. And what do you suggest? Of course not. Lawrence reached across the table and squeezed my hand. But we need proof. If you go to the police now, Gareth will just say that he was trying to take care of you and you misunderstood. I nodded, understanding the logic of his words. So, what do I do? Lawrence tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the table. You said Gareth was planning to come over today? Yes, at 2 o'clock. And you suspect that he might try to do something? I nodded slowly, feeling the reality of the thought hit me over and over again. Then, Lawrence leaned forward, you need to gather evidence, but be careful, Thora. Very careful. What do you mean? I asked, feeling my heart start to beat faster. If Gareth is really planning to do something, say, put something in your food or drink, you need to be prepared, and you have to have a way to prove it. I listened to Lawrence explain his plan. It was risky, but he was right. I needed concrete proof to protect myself. But even if I catch him red-handed, I said quietly, it means that my own son really did want to kill me. How do I live with that knowledge, Lawrence? He looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and hardness. The same way you've lived with all the other hard truths in your life, Thora. One day at a time. And remember, if he's really planning this, you're not the problem. The problem is him and probably his wife's influence. I nodded, feeling strangely calm. Good, I said, straightening up in my chair. I know what to do. Driving home, I thought about the plan. It was simple and dangerous at the same time. To let Gareth try to carry out his intention, but to be one step ahead. Setting a trap for my own son was a thought that would have seemed absurd a week ago. Saturday brought with it a rare coolness for Bakersfield. I woke up before dawn, feeling the cool air seeping in through my open bedroom window. Today was the day my son was going to come to me with an intention that was scary to think about. The clock read 6 in the morning, when I finally stopped pretending that I could fall asleep again. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling a strange emptiness inside. This emptiness swallowed up fear, pain, doubt, everything but cold determination. After talking to Lawrence, I stopped at the pharmacy and bought 2 identical bottles of mineral water, the same ones I always kept in the fridge. In the evening, I put one of them on the kitchen table, as if I had accidentally left it after dinner. The second one was waiting for its time in the cabinet above the sink. At 10:30, the phone rang. It was Effie. Hi, Toro, she said, sounding as cheerful as ever. How was dinner last night with Gareth and Maeve? I froze, not knowing what to say. Should I drag Effie into this nightmare? Should I share this burden with someone? It was okay, I finally answered. Tense as usual, but we got through it. You seem strange today. Effie sounded concerned. Is everything okay? Yeah, I paused, looking for a plausible excuse. Garrett's coming by today to pick up his tools from the garage. Oh, that's good. Maybe you can finally talk in private without Maeve's influence. Maybe. I felt another stab of guilt for not telling her the truth. Effie, I have to go. I'll talk to you later, okay? Of course, dear. If you need anything, just say the word. If only you knew, I thought as I hung up the phone. I spent the next few hours mechanically doing household chores, cleaning, washing, watering the flowers. Ordinary actions helped me maintain my outward calm, even though everything inside was screaming with tension. I was taking a bag of black pepper out of the spice drawer when I suddenly stopped, struck by a new thought. What exactly was Gareth going to poison me with? What was his plan? Was he counting on the poison's quick action? Or on the contrary, a slow one that would imitate natural death? Much depended on the answer to this question. I put down the spices and went to the window. In the yard, my old garden table had been in need of repair for several years, but I never got around to it. Gareth had often promised to fix it, but each time he found an excuse for not doing so. And now he suddenly remembered his tools in the garage? At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I took out my old film camera, the same one Vincent and I used to take pictures of Gareth as children. Lawrence advised me to record everything possible in case the case went to court. But be careful, he warned. If Gareth notices that you're suspicious, he might postpone the plan or change it. I hesitated to set up a hidden recording on my old voice recorder, but decided the risk was too great. Instead, I placed several items in the kitchen so that I could see if anyone had touched them. A little trick Vincent had taught me when we were first married and renting an apartment in a dubious neighborhood. At 2:30, I heard the sound of a car pulling up in front of the house. Looking out the window, I saw a new crossover that I had spotted in front of their house. So Gareth had arrived alone, without Maeve. It was unexpected, but maybe for the best. I quickly checked everything again. The water bottle was on the kitchen table. The spare was hidden in the cabinet. I took a deep breath and walked to the door, waiting for the bell to ring. Hi, Gareth. I opened the door, trying to smile naturally. Come in. My son looked tense. His eyes were darting around the room, never stopping at my face. He was wearing a plain t-shirt and jeans, but he was holding a small backpack. Hi, Mom. He leaned over to kiss me awkwardly on the cheek. How are you? Good. I stepped back, letting him in. How was the ride home yesterday? Did Maeve drive okay? Yeah, it was fine. He walked into the living room, setting his backpack on the floor by the couch. She says she's not feeling well. Oh, I hope it's nothing serious? I tried to make my voice sound concerned. No, just a migraine. She gets them sometimes. He looked around as if assessing the situation. You said you wanted to get the tools out of the garage? I asked, following his every move. Yes, but there's no rush. He sat down on the couch, still avoiding direct contact. How are you feeling after last night's dinner? Did you have any stomach problems? I felt a chill run down my spine. The question seemed so suspicious that I could barely keep my voice from trembling. No, I'm fine. Why do you ask? I was a little worried. Maeve was so worried that the meat might have been undercooked. Maeve? I couldn't hide my surprise. But she didn't say anything yesterday. Well, you know how she is. She didn't mean to offend you. His words sounded false even to him. Gareth had never been good at lying, a quality he'd inherited from Vincent, who blushed every time he tried to hide a birthday surprise from me. Would you like some tea? Or water? I asked, deliberately pointing to the bottle. No, thanks, he stumbled. Although water would be nice. It's hot today. Take it. I nodded at the bottle. I just took it out of the fridge. He looked at the bottle but didn't get up to take it. Later. Listen, Mom. I wanted to talk to you about something important. I sat down in the chair across from him, folding my hands in my lap to hide my trembling. I'm listening. It's about your health, he began, finally looking me in the eye. Maeve and we're worried. You live alone, and if something happens... I'm fine, Gareth, I interrupted him. I have regular checkups. Yes, but... He reached into his backpack. I brought you something. My heart sank as he unzipped it and began to search for something inside. Instead of poison, as I had expected, he pulled out a booklet. This is information about new insurance programs for people your age, he explained, handing me a glossy booklet with the logo of the same insurance company that had issued the policy. I slowly took the booklet, feeling the surrealism of the situation growing with each passing second. My son had come to me with an insurance company brochure, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, after he had taken out life insurance on me without my knowledge. Thank you, I'll look it over, I replied, flipping through the pages. Mom, do you mind if I work in the yard for a while? That garden table? I've been meaning to fix it for a while. Of course, I nodded. The tools are in the same place in the garage. He stood up and walked to the back door. I stayed sitting there, trying to figure out his strategy. Perhaps he decided to calm me down first, and then find a moment to implement his plan. When the door closed behind him, I quickly walked to the window, watching him walk to the garage. Then I turned to his backpack and, feeling a stab of shame, cautiously looked inside. Among the things I noticed a small bag of white powder. My throat tightened. It was the moment of truth. Physical proof that my own son was planning to poison me. I wanted to take the sachet but stopped myself. If he noticed it was missing, the plan would be foiled. Instead, I took a picture of the backpack with the open compartment where the powder was visible, and then carefully put everything back. Gareth spent the next half hour in the yard pounding loudly with a hammer. I stayed in the house, periodically peeking out the window to make sure he was still there. At 3:20 he came back, sweaty and dusty. "Ugh, it's unbelievable hot today," he said, wiping his forehead. "Is the water still cold?" I froze. "It should be," I said as calmly as I could. "I can get another one from the fridge if you want." "No, no, this one's fine." He took the bottle from the table. "I want to work on the table some more." "Sure, take it." Gareth smiled. For the first time that day, it was a sincere smile, and walked back out into the yard with the bottle. I waited a minute, then went to the window. He was standing with his back to the house, holding the bottle in one hand and a bag of powder in the other. I quickly stepped away from the window, my heart beating so hard that it seemed like it was about to jump out of my chest. The plan was becoming clear. He would put poison in my water, then come back and offer it to me, or leave it on the table, hoping I would drink it later. Acting quickly, I took a second identical bottle from the locker and placed it on the table, in exactly the same position as the first. I didn't have to wait long. A few minutes later, Gareth returned holding a bottle of water. "Ugh, this heat is killing me," he said, placing the bottle on the table next to the one I had just gotten. "Listen, Mom, I have to go out for a minute. I forgot something in the car. I'll be right back." When he left the house, I took a quick look at the two bottles. They were absolutely identical, but I knew exactly which one was poisoned, the one on the left. Without wasting a second, I swapped them and went to the sink, pretending to wash the dishes. Gareth came back a few minutes later with a small box of screws. "Found them," he waved the box. "I need them for the table." "Great," I smiled, toweling my hands. "Don't you want to rest? Would you like a drink of water?" He hesitated, looking at the two identical bottles. Yeah, I guess. "Take either one." I pointed to the table. His eyes narrowed for a moment, clearly trying to remember which bottle he had left on the table. Then, having made a choice, he took the one on the right, the poisoned bottle I had moved. "You're not having any?" he asked, unscrewing the cap. "Later," I replied, feeling strangely calm. "I'm not thirsty now." Gareth took a big gulp and then another. I watched him, feeling a mixture of horror and cold determination. Part of me wanted to scream, to wrestle the bottle from his hands, to stop what was happening. But the other part of me, the part that knew what he was planning to do to me, remained still. "Good water," he said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "So what were we talking about?" "Insurance," I reminded him, watching his face carefully. "Oh, yes." He put the bottle on the table and sat back down on the couch. "Mom, I think you should seriously consider these offers. At your age?" He suddenly stopped talking and ran his hand over his forehead. I noticed the first drops of sweat appearing on his face. "Is something wrong?" I asked, as if I didn't notice anything. "No, it's just," he swallowed. "It's really hot in here. I can turn on the air conditioner." "Yes, please." He reached for the bottle again and took another sip. I went to the thermostat and turned on the air conditioner, keeping my eyes on my son. He was already looking pale, and his hand holding the bottle was trembling a little. "Gareth, are you okay?" I asked, coming back into the living room. "Yeah, it's just..." He ran his hand over his forehead again. "I feel weird." "You don't look well." I sat down across from him. "Should I call a doctor?" "No," he replied sharply, then softened his tone. "It's just the heat." But it was not heat. His face turned greenish and large drops of sweat appeared on his forehead. He began to breathe rapidly, as if he was short of breath. "I have to go to the bathroom," he muttered, trying to get up. But before he could take a few steps, he grabbed his stomach and bent over in pain. "What? What's going on?" "I don't know, Gareth." I walked over to him, feeling my heart breaking with pain, but my mind remaining cold. "Maybe the water made you sick?" He looked at me with horror and sudden realization. "Water?" He looked at the bottle, then back at me. You knew?" About what, Gareth? I looked him straight in the eye. About putting something in the water bottle? The one you're drinking now? He opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, another spasm of pain twisted him and he fell to his knees. Mom, help, he groaned. How would you help me? I sat down next to him, looking into his eyes, which were now filled with pain and fear. What would happen to me if I drank that water? It's Maeve, she said. It's just supposed to make you sick, not die. Don't lie to me. I grabbed his shoulders. You took out insurance on my life. $500,000. You forged my signature. His eyes widened in shock. You know? Of course I know. I sounded bitter. I found the document. And then it all made sense, your talk about my health, the sudden deaths, the new car you couldn't afford. I understood everything, Gareth. He flinched, but not in pain this time. It's not what you think. No? Then what is it? I pointed to the backpack. What kind of powder did you bring with you? What were you planning to do? He didn't answer, gasping for air like a fish on the shore. A new wave of pain made him curl up on the floor. I need an ambulance, he groaned. Would you call an ambulance for me, Gareth? I asked quietly. Or would you let me die slowly in agony while you wait to get your money? Mom, please. His voice was barely audible. I didn't mean to. It was Maeve. She said it would only make you sick for a few days, so you'd be admitted to the hospital, for insurance. And you believed her? My voice sounded indescribably tired. After you took out insurance on my life without my knowledge? After you forged my signature? Do you really expect me to believe that your goal was simply to make me sick? He did not answer, moaning in pain. I looked at him, my child, whom I carried under my heart, whom I breastfed, for whom I worked 2 jobs to pay for his education. My son who was planning to kill me. You know what the worst part is, Gareth? I said, finally dialing the emergency number. It's not that you wanted to kill me. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice said. I need an ambulance, I answered, not taking my eyes off my son, who was writhing on the floor. He's conscious, but he's very sick. I dictated the address and answered a few standard questions, trying to speak calmly and clearly. The ambulance is on the way, the operator said. They'll be there in 10 to 15 minutes. Yes, I'll stay on the line, I answered. Then, covering the microphone with my hand, turned to Gareth. Why? Just tell me why. He looked up, his face distorted with pain and shame. The money, the debts. Maeve said, You're old. You're going to die soon anyway. He spoke in fragments between spasms. She said, You never loved me. You were always controlling, destroying my dreams. I felt something break in my chest, the last link that connected us. And you believed that? You believed that I didn't love you? My voice trembled. After everything your father and I did for you? He coughed. You were always so cold, so right. You never understood. What didn't I understand, Gareth? That you were special? That the world should bend to suit you? That adult decisions have adult consequences? I could feel the anger and pain mixing in my voice. I raised you the best I could. I sacrificed everything so you could have the opportunities I never had. What dream, Gareth? Going off with that bunch of uneducated kids who called themselves musicians? Do you know what happened to them? 1 died of an overdose, 2 are in jail for stealing. Was that your big dream? He didn't answer, just moaned in pain. I put the phone back to my ear, making sure the operator was still on the line. They'll be here soon, I said, crouching down next to my son. Listen to me carefully, Gareth. When the ambulance arrives, I'm going to tell them the truth. That you tried to poison me but accidentally drank the poison yourself. I'll show them the powder in your backpack. And I'll call the police. No, he groaned. Mom, please, no police. What did you expect? I looked at him, feeling bitter in every word. That I would just forgive the attempted murder? What would I say? It's okay, son, it happens. I didn't mean to kill. He closed his eyes, tears streaming out of them, either from pain or fear, I couldn't tell. Just make her sick, get her to the hospital, Activate the insurance. And you really believe what you're saying? I asked tiredly. After you forged my signature? After you took out the policy without my knowledge? He did not answer. At that moment, I heard the sound of an approaching siren. They're here, I told the operator. Thank you for your help. Stay with the patient until they arrive, the operator replied, and I hung up. Gareth, I leaned over to my son. One last chance to tell the truth. What was in that powder? I don't, I'm not sure. He barely managed to make out the words. Maeve got it. She said it would, cause symptoms of food poisoning, but it wouldn't kill. And you believed her? She's my wife. Of course I did. The siren sound got louder, then suddenly stopped, and I heard the ambulance pull up outside the house. A few seconds later, there was a knock on the door. I stood up, taking one last look at my son, who was lying curled up on the floor of my living room. The man who had once been my little boy. Help is here, I said, walking to the door. As I opened it, I knew that my life would never be the same. No matter what happened next, the poison of doubt and betrayal would change us both forever. Two paramedics quickly entered the house. Where is the patient? One of them asked. In the living room, I answered, pointing in the direction. The powder is in his backpack. I pointed to the backpack near the couch. He tried to poison me, but I changed the bottles and he drank it himself. The paramedics exchanged quick glances. It was probably not every day that they heard stories like this. We'll take care of him, the second paramedic said, pulling out his radio. I'll call the police. I nodded, stepping back to give them space to work. Watching them bend over Gareth, checking his pulse and pupils, I felt a strange calm. It was as if everything that was supposed to happen had already happened, and now all I had to do was watch the aftermath as an outsider. I spent the next 3 days in the corridors of Bakersfield City Hospital, sitting on an uncomfortable plastic chair and watching the doctors and nurses rush past me. Gareth had been admitted to the intensive care unit with a diagnosis of acute poisoning from an unknown substance. The analysis showed that the powder contained a high concentration of rat poison mixed with some other toxins. The doctors were surprised that he survived after drinking that amount. If he had drunk the whole bottle, or if help had arrived even an hour later, we would not have saved him, the chief doctor, Dr. Ramirez, told me, looking at me with a mixed expression of professional restraint and human compassion. The police arrived at the hospital almost simultaneously with the ambulance. Detective Marcus Finch, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and graying hair, listened to my story without interrupting or showing surprise. So, you're saying that your son tried to poison you, but accidentally drank the poisoned water himself? He checked the notes in his notebook. Yes. I handed him the photos I had taken. Here's the proof. An insurance policy issued without my knowledge, with a forged signature. Here is a photo of the backpack with the powder. The detective studied the photos carefully, then looked at me. Mrs. Caldwell, do you understand that these are serious charges that will lead to a criminal investigation? Yes, I answered without hesitation. And I am prepared to testify in court if necessary. You will need a protective order, he said, closing the notebook. I recommend that you go to court as soon as possible. On the 4th day, Gareth was transferred from intensive care to a regular ward. The doctors said that the danger had passed, although the consequences of the poisoning will be felt for a long time. Damaged liver, kidney problems, possible neurological complications. He will live, but he will probably never fully recover. I did not go to visit him. Instead, I sat in the hospital office, signing papers confirming that I would not be responsible for paying for his treatment. He is my son, but I am not going to pay the bills of a man who wanted to kill me, I explained to the administrator, who looked at me with open-minded condemnation. It is amazing how quickly people are ready to condemn a mother who does not rush to save her child, even if that child is a 32-year-old man who planned his death. When I got home, there were 7 messages on my answering machine from Maeve. The first 2 were full of concern for Gareth and questions about what had happened. In the next 4, she went from bewilderment to rage, accusing me of all the deadly sins. In the last message, she threatened to sue me for deliberately poisoning her husband. I deleted all the messages and blocked her number. The next morning, I met with Lawrence to apply for a protective order. Sitting in his office, I felt strangely calm, as if the worst was over, and now I was just completing the necessary formalities. The police found evidence on Maeve's phone, Lawrence said, looking over the documents. Messages where she's discussing the details of the plan with Gareth. They've both been arrested. Maeve is charged with conspiracy to commit murder, Gareth with attempted murder and insurance fraud. What kind of punishment will they face? I asked, feeling less anger or revenge than tired and eager for this to be over. It's hard to say for sure. Lawrence took off his glasses and wiped them with his handkerchief. But all things considered, Maeve could get anywhere from 7 to 15 years. Gareth probably less, given that he was the victim, and if he cooperates with the investigation. I nodded, neither relieved nor satisfied with this information. What do I do next, Lawrence? He looked at me with a long, appraising gaze. What do you want to do, Toro? I thought about it. For the past few days, I had been on autopilot, solving immediate problems without thinking about the future. But now that the worst is over, it's time to think about what's next. I want to start a new life, I answered after a pause. Somewhere far away from here, without reminders of what happened. Sell the house? Yes, it's too big for me alone, and there are too many memories in it. Not all of them are bad, but right now they're all poisoned by what happened. Lawrence nodded in understanding. I can help with the sale. I know a realtor who works quickly and honestly. As for a new place, have you thought about where you want to move? I shook my head. I don't know. Just somewhere where no one knows me. Where I can just be Tora, not the woman whose son tried to poison her. I see, he scribbled on his notebook. I'll get the paperwork ready for the court and contact a realtor. Are you sure you want to do this, Toro? I looked out the window of his office, at the familiar streets of Bakersfield, the city where I had lived all my adult life. A city that now seemed alien and hostile. The process of selling the house was surprisingly quick. The real estate market was booming, and the old but well-maintained house in a good neighborhood quickly found buyers, a young couple with 2 small children. Watching them walk through the rooms, discussing where they would put the crib and how they would paint the walls, I felt something akin to envy. Vincent and I used to be like that, young, full of hopes and plans for the future. The court set the date for Gareth and Maeve's hearing for the end of the month. Lawrence told me that my presence was not necessary. All the evidence had been gathered, and the police had enough to charge me. Do you want to attend? He asked during our last meeting before I left. No, I replied without hesitation. I don't want to see them again. Never. That's understandable. He shook my hand. I'll let you know the results. Where did you finally decide to move to? Santa Barbara, I answered, feeling something like joyful anticipation for the first time. I've always wanted to live by the ocean. I found a small house in a nice neighborhood, not on the first line, of course, but it's walking distance to the beach. Sounds great, Lawrence smiled. A fresh start. Yeah, I nodded. Just what I needed. The hardest part was saying goodbye to Effie. We sat on my porch like we had hundreds of times before, but now knowing it was the last time. I'm going to miss you, Thora, she said, squeezing my hand. But I understand your decision. Thank you, Effie. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. For everything. You've been a better friend to me than I ever deserved. Nonsense, she waved her hand. You deserve better. And I'm glad you finally found the strength to take that step. What step? To live for yourself, she smiled through her own tears. How many years have you lived for others? For Vincent, for Gareth. Even when Gareth grew up and stopped respecting you, you still lived with him in mind. Now is your time, Thora. Time to think about yourself. I hugged her, feeling something inside me finally let go. The pain, the guilt, the sense of duty that had been dragging me down for years. Promise me you'll come visit me, I said, wiping away my tears. I promise, Effie nodded. And don't forget your old friend either. I moved to Santa Barbara on Wednesday, September 23rd. It was a sunny and warm day, typical of the California coast. My new house was small but cozy. 2 bedrooms, a living room with access to a terrace, a small garden with a lemon tree. The former owners had left some furniture behind, so I didn't have to start from scratch. The first few days, I just explored the neighborhood, enjoying the anonymity. No one knew my story. No one gave me sympathetic or judgmental looks. I was just a new neighbor, a middle-aged woman who had moved from another city. On weekends, I sat on the beach, watching the waves crash on the shore, and thought about how strange life is. Just a month ago, I was a mother, a daughter, a widow, a person burdened with family ties and responsibilities. Now I was just me. Tora Caldwell, a 56-year-old woman who, for the first time in her life, could do what she wanted without having to answer to or justify herself to anyone. On Monday, I had an interview at a local private school that was looking for a math teacher. The principal, a nice woman in her 60s, was impressed with my experience and offered me the position immediately after the interview. "We're a small school, but the kids are great," she said, showing me around the classrooms. "I think you'll like it here, Mrs. Caldwell." "Please call me Tora," I asked. "Tora," she smiled. "It's an unusual name. Does it have any special meaning?" "My father was a big fan of Norse mythology," I smiled back. "Thora is the female version of Thor, the god of thunder." "A strong name," she nodded. "I hope we can become friends." "I hope so too," I replied, feeling something akin to joy at the thought of new acquaintances and new opportunities. On Wednesday, exactly 1 week after I moved in, Lawrence called. "The verdict is in," he said without preamble. "Maeve got 12 years for conspiracy to murder and fraud. Gareth got 8 years, with the possibility of parole in 5, given his cooperation with the investigation, and the fact that he was a victim." I sat on the terrace, holding my phone and watching the sun slowly sink to the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "Thanks for letting me know," I said after a pause. "How are you doing, Toro?" He sounded genuinely concerned. "I'm doing well," I replied, and it was true. My house is small but cozy. The ocean is just a 10-minute walk away. "I'm happy for you." I could hear the smile in his voice. "You deserve to be happy, Toro." "Thank you, Lawrence, for everything." After the call, I sat on the terrace for a long time, watching the stars gradually appear in the darkening sky. Strangely, I felt neither triumph nor satisfaction that justice had been done, only a quiet sadness for what could have been, but never will be. I thought about Gareth, not the grown man who planned my murder, but the little boy with freckles and bright red hair who proudly showed me his first catch. About how he laughed when Vincent threw him high in the air. About his first day at school and his first bruised knee. About all those moments that once seemed so important, but now turned into ghosts of the past. I didn't know if I would ever be able to forgive him, or even if I wanted to. But I knew that I had to move on. Otherwise, the poison of the past would destroy me from the inside out, like the chemicals that were destroying Gareth's body. The next morning, I woke up with the first rays of the sun. The ocean was calling me, and I decided to take a walk on the beach before work. The air was fresh and salty, and the sand under my feet was still wet from the night tide. I walked along the shoreline, feeling the sea breeze tousling my hair, and thought about how strange my life had turned out. About how sometimes the scariest moments can become catalysts for the best changes. That sometimes you need to lose everything to find yourself. An old man sat near a large stone on the shore with an easel, painting the sunrise. He nodded to me as I walked by, and I nodded back. A small, inconspicuous gesture that for some reason seemed symbolic to me, acknowledging the existence of another person without invading their space. Perhaps, I thought as I walked back to the house, this is the essence of the new stage of my life, learning to appreciate these small, unremarkable moments. To find joy in simple things, in a morning walk, in the silent greeting of a stranger, in the taste of freshly brewed coffee. To find peace in loneliness, which now seemed not a burden but a gift, an opportunity to finally know myself, without the distracting demands of other people. On my way back to the house, I stopped to pick a lemon from the tree in my new garden. Its bright yellow skin seemed almost unnaturally bright against the green leaves. A symbol of a new beginning, a new life that might be sour at times, bitter at others, but always authentic and real. My own.